from StorageCraft with me here today as well. We're very excited to have you along to our OneSafe webinar today. Thank you so much for clearing the time in your busy schedules to join us. We've got a great mix of attendees today. Quite a lot of schools are joining us today, and then some also other types of organisations as well. And it just goes to show that the sort of challenges we're talking about solving for today are really universal. And I think that's reflected in our attendee list today. So I'm going to be doing the intro today, and then Michael's going to be chatting through the guts of it. But please feel free. We've got a modest group of about 15 this morning. So you feel free to unmute yourself at any time and just jump in and ask a question. You can also put questions in the chat, and myself and Alex from our marketing team will be we'll be answering those along the way, and we'll do Q&A at the end as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll kick off. Somebody give me a shout out if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Brilliant. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, as I said, my name's Amanda Mapp. I'm a business development manager here at BES IT Systems. And BES have been partners with StorageCraft for, I don't know, about 18 years now, from their inception with their original product all the way through to the modern suite of products and services that they have now. And yeah, all the problems that they solve for. So when we were looking at what sort of events we wanted to run this spring, I was very, very keen to partner with Michael to run a webinar about the OneSafe product, mostly for selfish reasons, so we could save ourselves some time, because we're doing about 3 or 4 meetings of these with this product a week with customers at the moment, because it solves so many challenges and it fits into so many different spots in terms of infrastructure. So when we're before we jump in to chat a little bit about the product, a bit of an overview about BES. Now, most of you guys who are on the call today are already our customers, have already had dealings with us in the past. But of course, we are a managed services provider and procurement partner. We are Brisbane-based, and we were established in 1988 in Brisbane City. We've got quite a broad footprint across education, corporate services, not-for-profit and SMB as well. So we help out lots of different types of customers with lots of different types of challenges. Today on the call from BES, you've got myself, John Dowd, and also Matt Maynard. So hello to my colleagues. They'll be here to answer questions as well, and I know some of their customers.
So don't be shy, we can help you out.
Too. So
thanks for
this is how you can get in contact with us if you're not already. Our email addresses are here. You can also find us on LinkedIn, and our website is a treasure trove of information about our most popular products and services as well. So do jump on there and have a little peruse. But yeah, absolutely. When we're chatting about what sort of events we wanted to do in October, I was jumping up and down wanting to do a StorageCraft webinar with Michael around the OneSafe, because we've seen with our customers in the last 12 to 18 months, it just slot in to solve so many challenges. So when I'm out having conversations with my customers, the most common challenges that I'm hearing about are some of these. So we've got organisations and schools having an increase in data retention requirements, and what that means is they're having this explosion in unstructured data and storage requirements. So they're seeing NAS sprawl across their environment, or a mixture of storage starting to create some complexity and some management headaches. Very commonly as well, we've got some companies on 3-tier architecture who would love to move towards a more elegant hyper-converged solution, but they've got all of this write once, read many style data that is just it takes up a lot of space. They might not want to pay to put that on premium hardware, and they want to know, what's the most efficient way to deal with this data so that it's still really available, it's still secure, but it's not going to bloat my hyper-converged infrastructure when we make that move, Or we're already on hyper-converged infrastructure like a Nutanix solution, a SimpliVity solution, maybe an Azure HCI stack. But still on the side, they're seeing this rapid growth of unstructured data, more so than any other part of their environment. And they don't want to, pay to scale the compute with that storage because it just doesn't need it. So how do they scale efficiently when they're already on HCI? I see a lot of customers with security concerns around the backup targets that they're currently using. So whether that be, network attached storage, very popular solution, cheap, readily available, and what have you, but often in the way that those solutions are designed, they can be fairly susceptible to ransomware and other threats. So we see, a lot of security concerns around how secure backup targets are currently. A lot of customers are still have a bit of a tape footprint, whether that be that they're just keeping some tape on site or they're actually still paying for the archival of tape off-site, air gap with storage. But of course, with tape, you have those retrieval concerns where, over time, tape heads can degrade. They can be harder and harder to read. I had a school tell me a little while ago that they pay, to keep, was it 300 tapes off-site, and we're confident that they could read about the last 20. And that's, and that's a real concern. And I think a lot of our IT professionals who have been around for a little while, most of us have a horror story around spending a month trying to retrieve a certain file from a tape.
Yep.
So a lot of us have PTSD around that, and want to look forward to, okay, what what could replace this tape technology. And then, finally, most of us aren't lucky enough to build our infrastructures from scratch. A lot of us inherit the infrastructure that we have, that we're managing, whether it be at a school or a company and what have you. And with that comes legacy backup designs that were designed at a point in time to be effective at a point in time. But of course, threats are rapidly changing. The landscape's rapidly changing. And what was best practice 10 years ago, or pretty decent 5 years ago, might not be cutting the mustard now. So we're seeing, complexity in the management of that, often several different types of software solutions, several different types of targets, and not as much strategy as we like to see in terms of the management of those. So those are some of the challenges that I'm coming across with my customers, week after week. And after every phone call, I give Michael a call and I say, somebody else needs a StorageCraft, Michael.
We need a StorageCraft.
We needed StorageCraft. And so that's why we wanted to do this chat today with Michael, so he could chat a little bit about StorageCraft as a company for those of you who aren't overly familiar, but specifically around the OneXafe Object Storage device and how it meets all of these criteria and solves a lot of challenges for a lot of our customers and a lot of other customers. So with that, I'll pass off to Michael here next to you. So he's going to have a little chat about himself and StorageCraft and about this brilliant device.
There we go. All right, I'll jump in. Thank you, Amanda. I think you framed that really, really well. So yeah, we've had lots of conversations, I think, over the past month or so, and those similar headlines seem to keep coming up. So thank you for everybody jumping on the Teams call out here at Teamsland. So hopefully we can probably do the next 40 or so minutes justice for the session and bring it all together for you as we go. So StorageCraft as a business, as Amanda said, we've worked with Bez for about 18 years or so now. I think Bez has been around for about 30, close to 33 years now. So good long history there from a partnership perspective. I joined StorageCraft in 2016 after spending about 15 years in backup and recovery. So some of the problems that we're seeing now are things that have progressed and evolved over time. From a StorageCraft perspective, Bez are our highest level of accreditation as an elite partner. And in about 2016, our business evolved for the better. So we had some changes kind of come in, and some of the things that we had with that was trying to treat problems differently. So we've always had an agent which protects data on servers, and does snapshots and takes that data away. Pretty short that we kind of realised we needed to change that game a little bit and deal with some of those infrastructure challenges that that Amanda touched on. So as part of this webinar, what we kind of wanted to do was represent some of the information or present some of the info that we've been through through some of the surveys we gathered through IDC and a couple of other groups. So we'll present that as we go. But what we're looking at here is effectively about 88% of the organisations that we surveyed, so customers and prospects of ours, have data that is kind of under about a petabyte worth of storage in ranging capacities. I'm sure some of you may fit on that spectrum there as well, and always ranging in the mix of, you know, kind of being like a medium business or a large business, as you can see from the results that we've got there. In terms of organisations that had a cloud strategy, this was done in 2018, this survey. You know, there is a mix obviously there of on-prem, preferred, hybrid. It's kind of a mix of everything these days. So we have to have a product suite that kind of matches with that. And as you can see, there's a mix of industries in terms of who we looked at and covered for this. So touched on the infrastructure concerns as we started the call that Amanda framed for us really well, and then we'll probably touch on some of the protection elements, right? So in terms of the organisations that we spoke to, which lead to probably another data point in terms of protection levels and those sorts of things. You know, the majority of organisations surveyed 80% or so have more than 3 systems to obviously look after and protect, right? So this one's a bit of a scary one. So 86% of organisations that we surveyed had experienced some form of data loss. Now that is quite concerning, and also a large number in the 12 months prior as well. So this survey kind of took place when ransomware and crypto was not necessarily in its early phase, but certainly hadn't reached the prevalence that it had in the last 12 to 18 months. So this is where it got really scary. So we're thinking, you know, only about 15% of organisations could recover from a severe data loss, right, within the hour. So as part of that, all these things and thought processes and surveys influenced our product strategy and what we do. This is kind of a statistic which pops up pretty regularly, right? So everyone has a recovery plan, and the numbers that we've seen in the past 10 years, at least only 22% don't test it, right? So we've gotten to the point where there was a larger number of organisations out there that didn't do regular tests on their backup and recovery environments, and that can be for various reasons. Sometimes it's the size of data, sometimes it's DR infrastructure, cloud, and whatnot. So we sought to kind of put in a plan that kind of helps evolve that. We do have some shared customers that we'll talk about towards kind of the end of the session as well. This is an American reference that was put in place in this lovely slide deck that we've got here. So we'll just shift on to the next one. But as a common plan for yourselves, a DR plan obviously being the last line of defence after we get through all the security protocols and those sorts of things as well. So touching on, as I said, once we get past the infrastructure concerns, right, some of those things that are driving the reason for tape or the reason for you know, additional file servers and extra security are things like you know, making smaller points of entry, if you will, so less systems getting hacked and whatnot. But obviously a common threat is phishing these days. So we've seen this one from AT&T. I think locally we've had ones from Ergon Energy. We've had things from the ATO. We see a whole number of things which have popped up, but you know, obviously humans, right? Just another example for us there. This one's a bit of an interesting one, which I'm sure you know some of you have heard a story similar to this. So this is unfortunately pretty common. So the entry point into an organisation is via a click that probably shouldn't have happened. And then there was, you know, maybe sometimes it's up to 260 days that a hacker will sit inside an environment and work away unnoticed. and then over a series of time, they'll delete backups, just do some things, get rid of backup retention, all the rest of it, and then kind of unlock the badness, right? And make things happen with CryptoLocker, and then all of a sudden, there's that thing which pops up, which is now, I guess, more scary than what was the blue screen of death, right? And it's, hey, you need to pay now to get your data back. So unfortunately, in a lot of our conversations that Amanda and I have, we come across this, or somebody who's been in this situation, somebody who knows someone who's been in this situation, and that's kind of caused both Bez and StorageCraft to look at things a bit differently with our product set and how we actually address some of these concerns, not only from the infrastructure perspective, but also from a security and threat perspective. So I think this slide kind of talks to some of those infrastructure challenges, Amanda, that you raised earlier on. Right? If we could think of these two things, if we were to look at it from an infrastructure perspective and go, okay, cool, no dramas. I've got my hyper-converged infrastructure for my green lot down the bottom, which is my structured data, my virtual machines, CRM, ERP systems, those sorts of things. As you can see, graphed over a very, very long period of time, the predicted growth is very stable, very flat, right? So, we start thinking about things like unstructured data, things like file servers, footage of, we've had a lot of conversations with schools recently. A lot of guys are looking at online assemblies, keeping that storage for a while. St Kilda Footy Club, for example, they have all their player footage on OneSafe storage, right? And the intent is the more rich data gets, the more the unstructured stuff will grow. Unfortunately, that will cause pain, right? The ones that we've talked about in backup, in hyper-converged infrastructure. And the intent there is probably to treat unstructured data slightly differently to the way that we treat the way that we treat virtual machines and those sorts of things. So from a OneSafe perspective, some of the things that we can do, or things that we can achieve for an organisation, is three key things, right? So we're a NAS product, right? From a protocol perspective, so SMB and NFS are the two protocols that we share at the front. We fully integrate with Active Directory, and so as part of that process, what we kind of have happen is organisations who may have, file storage, as you can see by that graph. IBM and IDC forecast, I think 10x growth of unstructured data in the next 10 years, next 5 years, sorry. But where that growth is obviously happening on file servers and unstructured content. So if we're to store some of that on-prem, because some applications dictate that that's what we need to do, then we've got to find a way that we can have that data stored and protected where it lies, right? So that it doesn't cause us a backup pain, right? And so we achieve that with the OneSafe platform. We achieve that by doing some really, really cool things with our snapshots, which I'll touch on a bit later. But the other thing that everybody knows is that, or everybody may or may not know, I apologise, is that once data is initially created, right, after about 90 days, it is seldom looked at, right? So especially unstructured data, file content, all the rest of it. But every kind of user out there, and we've been through it with Coral, which is a case study that we'll talk about later, deems it to be one of the most important assets that you've got. So we either have that in our regular backup regime, right, that it needs to be protected every day, or we look at protecting it a different way. And so that's where our story with OneSafe kind of fits in, as being a file server, also a long-term archive platform where users can access the data natively on that platform, and you don't need to protect it with a software agent because it protects itself where it sits.
It's a pretty key differentiator between like your Synology QNAP NAS is the NAS that most of our customers would have lying around, and how OneSafe works. Yeah.
So the way that we tackle that is we want to make sure that we're protecting the data as it resides on the platform. So we have protection mechanisms that are in place with the object stores underneath, the number of copies that we have. We also have snapshots on the platform as well. But the way we also achieve another level of protection is for those virtual machines as well that you've got in your infrastructure. We say that that should also be a target for these for those backups as well, right? So if we've got a backup application sending data to this application to the platform, right? We're taking snapshots on that storage platform as well, and then we're replicating to protect. We're really creating that scenario where you're protecting your VMs from where they are onto a safe platform. We're then replicating to a write once, read many platform that's never written over, right? So we're effectively creating a very, very similar scenario to tape, and with the added benefit of being online, and also the ability to actually make it into a production copy should we need to. Right.
You can actually retrieve from this platform, though.
Retrieve from the platform, you can use it. It's not like AWS, you know, Glacier or anything like that, where you've got to wait for it to come back. It actually sits on-prem, and you can recover the data straight away. You can even have it as part of a live, active kind of DR environment as well, from an unstructured perspective as well.
Absolutely, egress out of cloud, out of public cloud's no fun.
No.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, we were just doing a repatriation for a customer out of Azure, back on premise, and yeah,
takes time.
The egress was I aged.
You aged. Very good. So what we're seeing here from a three I guess point of what we do is let's control and protect our file services, right? But let's also think of backup workloads as a form of unstructured data as well.
Okay.
Right. So that's also part of what we're thinking of in this platform here as well. Actually, if I can just go and touch on one point here. I know there are a lot of platforms that are out there that can handle probably the backup workload side of things and an archive workload, but very seldom do those platforms actually provide a scenario where you can actually use them as production file services, archive file services, and a backup target as well. We're unique with what we do under the hood to be able to achieve that outcome.
Absolutely. I know other vendors who try to solve for the challenges that OneSafe solves for will put forward two boxes to do still only 2/3 of what you can do.
Yes.
Because that's how fancy you are.
Very good. Thank you. You called me fancy. Thank you, Amanda. So I kind of didn't want to push too much on that previous slide in terms of what we do and how we do it, right? But I guess the thought process here is that any data that resides or ends up on a OneSafe platform, right, we protect it every 90 seconds. So what that basically means is, I mentioned before that the protocols we have are SMB or NFS, so we just share files, right? Nothing too cool there. Integrating with AD obviously gives us some ACL things that only people can see their data and their access, so we follow the right rules there.
That's good.
But in terms of protecting data where it lies, every time there's a piece of data landed on that platform, we'll snapshot it every 90 seconds, right? We'll then make sure that we retain those snapshots for a very, very long period of time. Right. We did that purely because we know the threat of ransomware that's out there. Right?
Absolutely. And you know who that's particularly going to appeal to is some of our customers who are on today are actually incumbent HP SimpliVity customers. So they're running their production with very sleek HCI SimpliVity solution, prod and DR. So they know all about that, you know, the benefits of immutable snapshots and how that, you know, their production is protected, you know, from a ransomware perspective on their production, and we love to see that same sort of technology in this sort of backup target sort of file sharing solution.
That's right, and this is where we've seen some huge gain for the OneSafe platform is really on taking that you know, that hyper converged stuff, flash storage, all the rest of it that should be on really, really high performing, expensive tin, and then really treating file services or unstructured data as a discipline or a service by itself, right? So obviously you've got your protection off the SimpliVity platform or Nutanix. I know you guys do a fair bit of both of those, and then being able to make sure you've got, you know, copies of that, right, and still able to access you know, files in case of an emergency, right? So if something does get into an environment where OneSafe is there and OneSafe is the platform where you're sharing files, what you can roll back to, right, is 90 seconds before the payload,
Yeah.
Right. So when things started to get encrypted, obviously you make sure we get rid of the infection across the network. We're good. Right, and then we can roll back to a really, really close, really, really short recovery point, right? And obviously that time frame, so the recovery time objective is also very, very short as well.
Absolutely.
Right? So we can maintain that for all file serving workloads, file archive, as well as our backups, right? So the same scenario that was presented with that mid-market account before, right, is if the backups are infected at a point in time, right? Then what will happen is well, for starters, the backups won't get infected. When the attempt for the deletion is attempted to occur, all that will happen is there will be a marker at that point in time on our file system that says this file should be deleted, right? But as you can see from the aging process that we've got here, we will actually hold that snapshot for months into years by default with the platform that we have. So that delete won't actually take place. Right? We can run you through the technical detail of how that works with objects underneath the hood as well. But the fact of the matter is that when people do things above on the file system, we have a level of protection underneath with our objects as well. They just can't get into it.
And so when we hear horror stories of our customers getting crypto, running into ransomware, the worst case scenarios is when their production gets done and it travels east-west across the networks and gets their backups as well. Very
common.
Whether that be the way that it's structured on the network or just the basic nature of the target itself. We have a lot more protection built into this type of target than what most of us see as, which is really nice. Because that's the saddest story of all, is when they get your backups as well. That's what we're looking to avoid.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like, you know, the backup software that we work with, it doesn't have to be our own. It can be the likes of a Veeam. This case study that we're looking at here is one that was done actually, I think in 2018 in the States. So you can see we've got Pure Storage underneath, and a typical scenario here was, you know, the customer was growing in terms of their app servers, their virtualization farm, and all the rest of it, right? And what they needed, but the thing that was actually bloating their whole flash storage with Pure was really the unstructured data, right? So if we're able to take some of that workload off the expensive spinning disk, and there wasn't a high level of operations that were needed for that, and nor was the Pure Storage suited to delivering file services, we're able to deliver a consolidation scenario here where, you know, you've got a streamlined either hyper-converged scenario, which you guys do a lot of, right? And then take, you know, the stuff that doesn't need to be on that platform onto a OneSafe. And what you can see here in this diagram is a ring of OneSafe appliances, right on the right there. So a ring for us is like the equivalent of a cluster. So our storage scales out. So if you start with one appliance with a few disks in it, you get to fill it up. You can then add another appliance and then another appliance and grow.
And it all just presents as one big storage pool, right? Which is nice. And I love that. We're doing quite a few with customers at the moment, where we're just providing them half full. Right? So some of the 4400 series, they got like 12 spots for disks in. We give them 6 disks to start off with. 10 terabyte, 12 terabyte, 8 terabyte, whatever. And then as they need more, they throw more disks in, and they can choose their own adventure, right? They don't have to be all the same size.
Choose your own adventure, Very good.
So we love that. And as you said, then you can just, you know, add 1 2-hour box at a time as you do fill it up. And then live your best life.
Live your best life. So yeah, that's kind of the path here. So there's a lot of history as to the OneSafe platform and what it can do or where it originated. But the intent is just to be able to grow and scale, but put protection levels on the data where it lands, right? And then also kind of add to that with some storage efficiencies as well. So things like dedupe and compression are turned on by default with this platform, right? So we've got three appliances that we kind of work with here in the OneSafe platform. So the 4412, which can grow out to a ring of 4412s. So 7 nodes in total, similar with the 4417. They're both our spinning disk models, right? So you can have 1 terabyte drives up to 12 terabyte drives in a single node or in a ring. You can mix 4412s and 4417s in the same kind of cluster as well. The 5410 is an all-flash unit, and certainly the majority of systems, which certainly I've put out in mines across the country, also in education premises in Queensland, North Queensland, as well, have been based on the 4412, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
That seems to be a scalable platform. It's built on reliable Intel hardware, and as you can see down the bottom, you can even see which kind of hardware we produce the platform on. So what that means is wherever you can get those service levels, we can provide that kind of support throughout Queensland as well.
Yeah,
most
lovely.
of the Queenslanders on the call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool.
You can jump up and down if you're over the border somewhere, but I think we're all pretty much
cool.
Brisbane based.
So
we're South East Queensland.
We've got these devices in Cairns, Townsville, Gold Coast, Brisbane. Bez have put some in New Guinea as well as Fiji.
Yep. John
So-
Dowd's fairly exotic with his customers. He likes having their tropical locales.
Yes, he does.
But yeah, actually, what I'd love to reiterate as well, something that a lot of our customers love is that you are backup software agnostic with this hardware, like you said, right?
Yes.
So if you're currently using Veeam to capture your VMs and you love that, if you're using some other, backup software already and you love that,
Like this picture?
then we don't need to strong arm you into changing that. You just change the target.
Correct.
So it's nice to play nicely with others.
We do. So the scenario with we've had this technology and been a professional or a technology partner of Veeam's for a very, very long time. As we present as a simple SMB or NFS target out to any application, it makes us really accessible for whatever is in place at the moment. So where we're seeing things go really, really interesting is the ability to finally get rid of tape. So there's without starting a holy war and obviously wanting some conversation out of the room as well, is the ability to get an online and an offline copy of data. With a OneSafe, we can achieve that in the way that we store the data. So in a typical scenario that we're looking at here, we've obviously got production copies, we've got snapshot copies, we've then got our remote DR copy, right? And then we might even have data sitting in a cloud in a standard sort of model. Effectively, you've still only got 5 copies of your data, except for, or unless you start considering tape as that medium as well, right? And offsite as well. So from a OneSafe perspective, right, we actually have the ability to store production file serving data as well as backups, right, on that platform, right? And therefore, what we're doing with each file that we're storing, we're breaking it down into little objects which have their own unique characteristics, and then we're storing those objects 3 times on each system, right? So giving the ability to have 3 copies of your data just on a single site, but all of the production array, if you will, or your hyper-converged infrastructure. Right, so from a file serving perspective, when we start getting into wanting to have a longer term retention of all file services or unstructured workloads, remembering that backup should be disciplined as that too. We're obviously protecting it every 90 seconds on that initial media that we have, which OneSafe platform with 3 objects-based protection. Right, we're then taking that to a DR site as well. Right, so ensuring that we've got that data protected and offsite and locked down off an asynchronous snapshot copy as well. Right, so
love that.
So what we're doing and what we kind of aim to achieve with this is help organisations remove themselves from tape, right? Consolidate their NAS workloads. So it's one of those things where I've been given another 10 terabytes or 5 terabytes or 4 terabytes of data that I've got to put on the SAN. Everyone goes, it's not kind of that straightforward, right? Because then it's got to be protected. That's going to cost me backup resources. It's going to cost me VM resources, and it creates a bit of a cycle here. So when we have those growing workloads from a file perspective, our intent is go, okay, backup is also part of that, right? So we have a great platform that can do some dedupe and compression for backups. Right, that platform also can be used for file sharing quite comfortably and also for file archive. Right, if we have a second system in play as well, right, then we're replicated to another site, right, and we've also, and both platforms can actually serve live data, and you can just have, I did jump ahead a little bit, that statement, Sorry, guys. But it's possible, and certainly in our implementations, we might have file services at site B in Cairns, for example, replicating down to Brisbane, and file services that are being served out of Brisbane replicating to Cairns, right? So the systems can protect each other, right, and ensuring that we've got protection in across all. In terms of what it means from our perspective, or what does it actually look like from a GUI side of things, nice pretty OneSystem GUI that manages your platform here. I don't know if that gets blocked in the bottom right corner, where you can actually see the appliances and the drives.
I don't know. I think that's just our little window.
That's just our little window.
I think so.
Yeah, cool. So in that system there, we can see that we've got 11 of the 12 drives kind of full. And if we need an extra, 4 terabytes because of our object store, it's just as simple as adding one more drive in, right? If we started with 6 drives, and we needed, 10% more capacity, we just add one more drive in. And then another drive and another drive as you go. You don't need to worry about RAID configuration and those sorts of things. So it also takes some of the guesswork out of a kind of a 5-year storage plan or a 5-year backup and recovery plan, and having to buy big assets up front. It really is a platform that you pay as you grow, right? And those unstructured workloads will grow, but the upside is that you don't have to break the bank to do it.
Yeah, right? And that's what I think there's a hallmark of any appealing on-prem infrastructure now, is that we have to be able to replicate those, like, IT consumption or model that people love about SaaS services.
Yep.
If on-prem infrastructure isn't scalable in that manner, then it's not appealing.
Correct.
We're moved away from having to have, to accurately predict what's going to happen in the next 5 years. We want, where we do want that cost control and administrative control of having things on premise, and that access, that pay-as-you-grow model has to be there. Yeah,
so certainly we've been involved in some cost analysis and TCO studies. I know every vendor does them, right? It kind of doesn't matter until you go through it with your own data and your own scenario, right? So I've been through a few personal ones here in Brizzy, and some of the things that we saw is that by default with the platform going in, it's very competitive from an infrastructure perspective in terms of how we do what we do, right? Comparing it to the AWS style of storage model with S3 and those costs per gigabyte, those sorts of things. When we start thinking about what we can do with our dedupe and our compression and the backup workloads and those sorts of things, right? And very much that pay-as-you-grow mentality, it is very comparable to a mix between AWS S3 storage, S3 Glacier, and all the rest of it, with the benefit of having everything online as well.
Yeah, and you can retrieve it like that.
Yes, as opposed to waiting.
Yes, as opposed to aging prematurely. Hey, I know that we've got some case studies that we can chat through next, but why don't we pull the slide back for a second, and open up conversation for a bit and see, because we've dumped a whole lot of information, see if we have any questions thus far. So I'll stop sharing for a minute and see where we're at. Okay, we're back in now. Guys, please unmute yourselves or jump into the chat if you're a bit shy, and hit us up with any questions or comments that you have around the information that we've shared so far in terms of how this platform works. We'll give you 30 seconds.
So one of the things that we haven't run through is how we do, and I don't have it on this slide because it's more of a technical dips and dives thing, is how we do our object placement and our object rebalancing. So things when you lose a drive, what do we do? How does that compare to like RAID, for example, and those sorts of things. So all professionals out there. So obviously in terms of RAID, it's you lose a drive, you lose 2 drives, big trouble. From our perspective, it's just a case of a rebalancing objects on a single drive. So we don't need to recalculate across the whole system or the whole cluster, right? It's very much a case of, oh, we've lost 1 drive, right? Every other drive in the OneSafe platform knows what it has and knows what the other drives have. So we've just got to recalculate the objects onto the new system, onto the new drives or the available space there. So very, very light in terms of when they're failure, and very, very easy to return to full service.
Absolutely, and I think that's what what we love about it as well, in that it really reminds us of the way Nutanix deals with data, in that high availability, several copies, giving you that redundancy in your production, in that you can have, quite a lot of disk failure in a Nutanix node before you see any dramas, because it does sort of rebalance in that same way. And so, yeah, I know when our colleague Dylan first came across the OneXafe platform with you in 2018, he said, wow, what it does for storage, it has these hallmarks of how Nutanix deals with data with multiple copies, high availability, and that resiliency under the hood in terms of hardware. But it has hallmarks of simplicity as well in the way that it does immutable snapshots, and it also has the compression and dedupe as well, which was obviously one of the original hallmarks of simplicity in the way that it deals with data workloads too. Albeit Nutanix has cool dedupe and compression now too. Hey, Chris has a question. He says, can you combine an all-flash device with a standard HDD device?
Not in a single ring, so not in a single cluster, right? So the way that we address those sorts of things is from a performance perspective. Yes, you will always get a high number of IOPS and those sorts of things from an all-flash system. What we do and how we achieve our, sorry, Amanda, I was out of screen. How we achieve a more efficient read and write process is the indexes that we have of our objects across all our drives. Right, so we operate a little bit differently to achieve an optimized file service read and write, such that a lot of our environments, our scale-out environments, so Kawasaki, for example, there'll be a slide that you'll see soon. They have, I think, 180 or so terabytes on just the 4412 clusters, right? That they write to from a file serving perspective for all their engineering diagrams and those sorts of things, but they don't actually need to leverage any flash in their environment, right? Because of what we do. So if we want, if you want a high performance number of reads and writes all the time, and it's sitting up there from an IOPS perspective, sure, we can facilitate that with a 5410 and growing out the 5410 cluster. But generally, for a lot of general file serving workloads or archive and backup, we're seeing that the 44 range can handle that pretty well. Hope that answers your question, Chris.
Cool. All right, well, if there are no more questions at this point, let's just jump back in and we'll cover off a few. Thanks, Blossom. Thanks, Chris. We'll jump back into the slides and just chat through, I guess, a couple of case studies where we've seen the OneXafe slot in really well.
Yeah, sure. So what have we got?
Oh, Coral.
There we go. So this is an interesting story. So I think Coral were experiencing a couple of challenges. They needed to, I think, they're in a hardware platform, an infrastructure as a service platform, and they were looking to move to a scenario whereby they could get some of their machines and from a private provider to a more holistic or well-known provider such as Microsoft, right? So we had a conversation with the BES team after I think BES was successful. Not I think, I know. BES was successful getting absolutely getting a positive outcome through a tender. And one of the things that we saw through that approach was there was, I think, maybe about 20 or so machines that needed to be migrated to Azure, and a hell of a lot of terabytes of file data as well. And so working with the team here locally, and there's a video thing that we can click on as well and go through, but we'll leave that to your own time. The thing that was really advantageous and apparent when speaking with Matt very early on was a lot of file servers that existed inside that infrastructure as a service platform, but a lot of the same data too. So people, humans, right? So we'd copy from file to file, folder to folder. There'd be a marketing folder in almost every kind of directory. If you can imagine, users would want their own stuff on their own home directory, right, and shift it from the server to their own stuff. It all ended up on a server or various servers.
Yeah, so if they chucked it all in Azure, it would have been wildly expensive, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that file upload would have, I think we were talking about 20 terabytes of data that ended up being. So the upside of that is I think it was taking up probably the solution that we proposed, obviously, was the OneSafe platform for the file services on-prem, very close to their draft engineers, so working with CAD applications and whatnot, and backing up some machines that were migrated to Azure, right down to the OneSafe platform.
Yeah.
Doing file services,
serving files
locally.
and backup target.
Yeah, doing that, and then replicating to a to a OneSafe that you guys host.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
we host the second one for replication. So.
Yeah, so backups, file services in multiple locations, as well as doing some cloud DR in the StorageCraft cloud for those machines from Azure as well. So, when it comes down to it, I think the story with Coral as well was unique, such that there was going to have to be a massive file classification exercise that they needed to do to be able to ensure that they didn't blow out their storage in Azure, right? Or blow out their storage if they didn't take it to Azure and then put it back on premise. The OneSafe came in as a platform and just said, no dramas. If you've got multiple files, multiple folders, files of the same, right, across your environment, across various folder structures, we can give you global dedupe on that platform. We can compress it, so across all different shares, we can get global dedupe and compression across all of that, and then we can replicate to protect. Right?
Absolutely. I think why it worked so well for Coral in their particular use case was, they were going from cloud to cloud, so from a kind of a private cloud hosted by another MSP over to Azure, but it was a step one of the bigger picture was always to bring everything back on premise. Because they wanted that cost control, they wanted the administrative control, they wanted that speed of having everything locally. And so, initially, the investment to chuck in 2 OneSafes, I think they saw ROI on that in less than 6 months in terms of how much it saved them off their Azure bill. Massive, it saved them like 30% off their Azure bill to start off with. And then they had all their stuff in Azure for about, 8 months to a year, whilst they then worked with us to finalize the design of what they wanted on premise, and now they're just repatriated into a Nutanix environment. But we've kept all that unstructured data on the OneSafe, haven't we? And that allowed them to have a sleeker, more efficient HCI footprint. Still keep access and everything's super fast and super efficient. So just beautiful.
Indeed, I was going to touch on that, Amanda. So, I guess with that, we talked about, probably before this, the scenario of do you move everything onto a big platform and then segregate accordingly? Certainly from a Coral perspective, the idea was, cool, let's take that file workload stuff that's going to be painful, it's going to be hard to get up into the cloud and then hard to get back down. Let's just put it somewhere to start with and let's build it out from there, right? So that data has grown within Coral, as you can imagine. They're actually one of the premier builders in Queensland and across the country. So they've experienced huge data growth in the last 12 to 18 months, and with what the government are doing, they'll experience more. So,
very busy at the moment.
So with that, we're seeing that growth. We're also seeing that with everybody else that we talk about and talk to, right? So the interesting part with that is, do we put everything on an HCI platform, right, and then have to be able to take it out of there via a backup application every day, or in case of a disaster, right? Or do we make sure that we've got our lean, mean HCI infrastructure in place, and we've got our backup workloads to protect that, and then it also gives us some flexibility and agility around DR as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it seems to have been a bit of a magical key when we're speaking to, schools especially, who still got sort of that server and SAN traditional 3-tier architecture, and have been thinking about moving to HCI for quite a while, but they know if they throw it all on HCI, it's going to be quite an upfront investment, and pairing all of that unstructured data with a hell of a lot of high-powered compute sort of goes against the grain a bit, doesn't it? So what we're seeing being more and more popular is a bit of a tidy up, declutter before you move house type of strategy. Absolutely. So we're seeing that a lot, and that is making schools and other organizations feel better about their HCI investment because it can be more efficient, and they can put those unstructured workloads somewhere more appropriate. And then also those who are already on HCI and who are feeling those growing pains and going, hey, do I need to? Just one of our schools we were talking to the other week saying, oh, we had to put in a 4th node now in Nutanix at the end of last year, and it was all really for storage.
Yeah, I think you might have another.
Oh, we got a question.
Somebody asking a question there, Amanda. But I guess you touched on the thing before with how are we a little bit different to a cheap NAS and whatnot. I guess the part of that process, or someone's just jumping in.
Oh, Adam's just joined us. Hey, Adam.
So I guess part of that process is, and what we're different to a Synology or a cheaper NAS or whatever it might be, is we've got protection built, right, inbuilt with a platform and at the forefront of what we do, right, and the efficiencies to ensure that if data resides on this platform, we're going to make it as lean and mean as possible to replicate to another platform, right, and we're going to keep it out of your backup rotation as well.
Yeah.
Right. So the intent is remove tape, reduce your file server sprawl, keep your HCI lean and mean, right, and purpose built, right?
Yeah.
So if it's handling the workloads that it should be,
yeah,
right, and then in 5 years' time, right, if you start looking at your graphing of machines and the general workload of the industry, a lot of machines are moving to platform as a service or software as a service, right, whereas the number of virtual machines aren't growing a great deal.
That's true.
So the intent is, if we can size that platform appropriately, provide the same functionality or protection matrix around our file serving workloads as we would have for our core infrastructure and core machines, then we're actually reaching efficiency at an infrastructure layer. We're finally removing tape, but we're also hitting the level of, I guess, cost containment and the unit cost of growth that you can then maintain not only for 5 years but 10 years ongoing, right? So the ability to mix a 1 terabyte drive and a 12 terabyte drive in the same system, 44 12s, 44 17s, as long as they're the same, as long as they're a spinning disk, which by the way is a software limitation that our guys have coded in, one that we're not allowed to change. It is possible to do it, you're just not allowed to do it. So
it's a lot of flexibility, and it's more flexibility than anyone's going to see anywhere else. So.
Yeah, exactly. But the thought process is obviously cost contained longer term. But then Coral, for example, when they hit like 30, 40 terabytes right, of unstructured data, they can add more systems right, to the cluster, if you will. Or when we come out with our next generation of devices, it can just be a case of, okay, we might have more density, larger drive types, right, and that then becomes part of an ever-growing kind of platform that you can keep 5, 10, 15 years into the future.
Lovely. Right, would you have any other case studies you want to run through, or shall we throw to questions? We're about 10 to the hour now.
Right.
What do you want to do?
Fine.
You're fine.
What would you like to do, Tina?
Let's jump in, guys. So we've talked about lots of different scenarios where we've seen the OneSafe fit and all the sorts of pain points that it solves for. So certainly, I know we've got a really interesting mix of customers on today who would have all different sorts of infrastructure that you're running and all sorts of different challenges. So, what sort of challenges are you seeing in your environments? Are you having, NAS sprawl, data retention requirements increasing? Hit us up, come off mute.
Concerned about crypto? Is that happening? Has it happened to someone you know? What was the process of recovery? Did it hurt? Those sorts of things. What could have streamlined those processes? Anyone?
Johnny, I'll call on you to jump in here and tell us a little bit about some of your customers that have utilised OneSafe as well. I know some of your customers in PNG and multi-site customers as well. So do you want to chat a little bit about how that came about while we're waiting for questions?
Yes, well,
PNG
was an interesting case, and thanks very much for Michael's work at our last year's conference day, where the guys from Toyota 2 Show asked a lot of questions about the StorageCraft OneSafe product and looking at the wrong camera, and decided that would best suit them in their operations in Australia, in their main site at Port Moresby and also in Fiji. So all those sites, there are basically car dealerships, Toyota car dealerships in each one of those places. So they're collecting a lot of information. The OneSafes allow them to both have archival storage and files in some sort of DR storage in those locations, and then they replicate between the three sites. I mean, the links aren't great, but the changes aren't great either, so it's able to work quite well. That's my little bit.
What about also, you've got a, remember last year as well, and last year you had, or is the start of this year, just a supermarket in PNG with a Nutanix footprint and a OneSafe set up
Sure.
as well.
So I have to say that's not there because of COVID. We have not been able to go back and install that, but the plan there is a similar combination of a DR where the images can be recovered. So the main site is with a mining company infrastructure in their data center. The OneSafe sits within the supermarket much smaller data center, and all images will be shipped across to that, which means that they can actually pick the box up and take it out if they wanted to.
A physical security bit there, is there?
There is. You've got a couple of different scenarios there, John. So I think with the StarMart over there in PNG, so they're both your customers in these scenarios that we're going to talk about are both Nutanix and Veeam customers. But specifically the StarMart one is where the last, I guess, the storage of last resort, where the lock and key kind of thing for the Veeam backups, right? In that scenario, so the last possible, effectively a tape replacement in that scenario. So there's some staging platforms in play as a backup target, and then there's the OneSafe as the storage of last resort with the supermarkets. With Toyota Tsusho, it's a bit different though, isn't it? Where I think they're throwing some ERP backups directly to it, so some straight, application jumps to it, as well as, and we're locking that down every 90 seconds when it's sent to it, and then replicating through their sites as well. So not using the Veeam replication, but leveraging the multi-site replication inside of the OneSafe as well for the niche, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I think you mentioned something yesterday, Michael, which was interesting, which was about being able to remove drives from OneSafe and reinsert them back into in any old OneSafe chassis somewhere else. And because the information is actually stored on the drives, it can recreate the whole array, if you like, whatever, and object store, and the storage can come back.
Yeah.
Well said, object store. My product managers will be a lot happier with that, John.
And we can see Aaron from Emmanuel College has a question here that you're typing, but Aaron, you can just unmute yourself and ask us directly if you'd like. Oh, you've typed it in. I've got it there. So Aaron from Emmanuel College has said, what's your ratio of raw disk size to usable size? I'm presuming you're using real-time dedupe and compression. Great question, Aaron. Yes. Great question.
Yes, and yes. So if we put, so a 4412, if we're using say 10 terabyte drives, say round numbers, so 12 drives in a single appliance, right, we'll have 120 terabytes raw. What we'll do with that is we'll take it to a level of, for every piece of data that we store, or every gigabyte of data that we store, we'll divide into an object, right? That object will be stored 3 times, right? And so therefore, if we've got 120 terabytes raw, we'll quite comfortably have, a 40 terabyte kind of usable space there, right? So that's before we get any dedupe and compression benefits out of it, right? So from our perspective, from a raw to usable, it's a straight up division by 3. When we have 2 systems replicating to each other, and we've got the systems in separate sites, we can get to a level where we're using 2 object-based protection as opposed to 3. But then we're able to add things like the inline, so real-time / inline dedupe and compression, right? So we're able to take that with a file workload perspective, and with that, with the policy that's with that storage, we generally see anywhere between 2 to 5 to 1 from a dedupe and compression of general file servicing workloads, right? Yep. So things like Word documents, Office, all the rest of it. Different with media, of course. Now, the other thing is that kind of dedupe is what we call a fixed block kind of dedupe, and that will be global across the entire 4412 cluster. Mm-hmm. If we've got a backup workload also on that system, we do a variable length dedupe as well. So backup streams can often be very repetitive, yeah, right? And so with that, we can actually grow, a repetitive stream so that we get pointers instead of objects stored. Mm. So that's how we get, instead of getting a 2 to 5 to 1 kind of compression on backup workloads with a variable length dedupe and the nature of that, we can get anywhere between 10 to 20 using, our own application or using Veeam as well. Yeah. So that varies also depending on workloads as well. But those are kind of the numbers that we see through our Red Zombie reports, which are our global system where we gather all the info around OneSafe.
Aaron, did that answer your question? I know that Emmanuel are looking at potentially doing a bit of an upgrade with their infrastructure at the moment, like some of our other schools who have joined us today as well. All right, thanks for the information. Hey guys, we've hit the hour mark, Michael. Cool. Time flies when you're talking about inline digit. Thank you so much, guys. We're happy to take more questions if you've got more questions at this point. Obviously, next steps, if you'd like to hear more about the OneSafe, how it might be able to assist in your own environment, please contact myself, Amanda at BES.com.au, John, who was speaking earlier, John at BES, or Matthew, you might have been in regular contact, who is M. Maynard at BES.com.au. And we would love to we can hook up one-on-one chats with Michael. We can size a solution for your environment and have a look at how the OneSafe might be able to solve a lot of your headaches. So yes, please get in touch. We'd love to assist you. We're very excited to see how many challenges this device has solved for our customers over the last 12 to 18 months.
Indeed.
All right, we've got one more question coming through. All right, thank you. All right, guys, well, if you don't have any other questions at this time, we will take our leave. Good. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your afternoon. And yes, get in contact if you'd like to know more. See you next time.
Guys. Cheers.